gentlemen, thank y'all for appearing in our special workshop meeting we're having tonight on June 21st, 2016. The offer is 6:06 p.m. And we do have a quorum that Mr. Stephen Gill is out. He's not with us tonight, so please note that.
Noted.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. Anybody that wants to know, this workshop, we were trying to coordinate it prior to tonight with, I guess, June being a busy month already with schedules and some of the issues we've had with flooding and stuff like that. It's just kind of hard to coordinate everybody to get together to have this workshop prior to this meeting. So thank y'all for being able to show up earlier so we can at least handle some of this discussion before we go into the meeting at 7. So hopefully we'll be able to handle those sooner than prior to the meeting. Going to item 2, the special workshop. Item A would be a discussion and consideration of a hotel occupancy tax.
And actually, I'd ask council to defer any conversation on this. We've got to make some revisions to the ordinance before coming back to you. We will have that back to you next month, and we'll bring it back for consideration and discussion. But you know.
Oh, we're not doing anything in action, okay.
Yeah,
So it'll be in July?
July, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Moving to item B, discussion and consideration of ordinance on council procedures.
And I'm gonna turn it over to Grady to open discussion on our item and.
Okay, y'all have the procedure in front of you.
Yeah.
The charter mandates the council adopt some form of procedures. That's all the charter asks you to do, in addition to providing for, citizens' comments. So this is a charter mandated, we can check that off one of the, checklist items. I'll go over this, briefly, because we've got 50 minutes to get through the rest of it. It adopts Robert's Rules of Order. The, mayor is the presiding, member, conducts all the meetings, dictates who he calls on in what order and how to take the items on the agenda. I'm the parliamentarian. You can, 2.5, a motion to enforce the rules. If you don't observe the rules, it doesn't affect the validity of any of your actions. You can amend the rules by majority vote. You can suspend the rules by 2/3 vote. 2/3 vote of a 5-member council is 4. Quorum of the 5-member council is 3. Next year, when you add one at large, the quorum will be a 4. And the year after that, when you go to 7, the quorum will be a 4. So it's 3, 4, and 4. And I'm under 4.1 right now. Under general law, when you had a special meeting, you had to have basically a supermajority there. That's no longer applicable under a home rule charter. So you can go with 3 as opposed to 4. Ironically, when you are 6, the quorum is 4, a majority vote is 4, and the 2/3 supermajority is, you guessed it, 4. So, the mayor may have some opportunities to really break some tie votes in 2017, if council splits on votes, with 6 members. Regular meetings are, the charter says once a month. These rules say at 7 o'clock on the 3rd Tuesday of each month. If y'all ever move to 2 meetings a month, you have to change the rule, but okay. Amend the rules by majority vote.
Yeah, on that, just to ask, on the the legal sense, I've always been told that the word shall basically means you
Mandatory.
must.
Correct.
And in 4.2, regular meetings, the city council shall meet at the city hall located at. So will that hinder us from ever being able to move it to the stern?
No, it says or another location.
There's a phrase or another location, and if it's a holiday, you can cancel or reschedule. So there's flexibility there.
If council wanted to change the time, move it up, move it back
For one meeting or
permanently or for one meeting, is it special action?
change the rules, just majority vote to change this rule. Typically, in the general law, you have ordinance, where you have regular meetings. It mattered more under general law, where you had a regular meeting versus a special meeting. And, because of the quorum issue here, you don't really have that issue, so you can change it to whatever three of you want to do. Special meetings at the mayor's request or upon the request of 3 members of city council. So 3, if y'all wanna call a special meeting, you can force that. If the mayor wants to call a special meeting, he can force that. City manager can call a workshop. Of course, he can call it and y'all don't have to show up, but, he has those. Investigations. We put these rules, so this was one of the issues on the second opinion, that there weren't rules of procedure for investigations. I took them out of the charter, cause I wanted them more flexible where y'all could fine tune them. This is where this begins in the 4.5. It references back to 3.06A of the charter for investigations that council may want to do. Nothing really new on public hearings. You can have concurrent and consecutive meetings. No, nothing magic there. 5, agendas. This is really just kind of tracking the open meetings law. Agendas required, notice is required. Let's talk about consent agendas.
Just on that part, on the agendas, if this is a law on the open meetings, why is it here? Why is it duplicated?
Just to have a, local procedural rule that you have to have it.
Cause like.
It's not I mean, it's not mandatory you have it because the Open Meetings Act requires it. They could change that, but as a home rule, you have your own power to put it in it. It's not mandatory, but easy reference.
I noticed after reading through a lot of this, that some of this is, there's duplication in this document to other ordinance documents to, the ethics, document that we're about to read, there's some of that in here, and,
They're all tied together.
so mainly my concern is how can we make this more simple than what it is?
Well, I don't think we necessarily need to simplify it, but there's a lot of I mean, if we wanna go through this, just let you give the overview and then we go through it. I mean, we could probably spend an hour just on this, just on changes. So it's up to you. I mean, if we wanna just hear your overview and then start going through it piece by piece and wordsmithing each individual provision, we can do that.
Well, 5.1, James says the city manager or his designee is responsible for creating the agenda. So it puts the accountability right on the city manager for making sure that agenda is up, accurate, and properly posted. So that's one reason that that's in there. The notice, it references 551 of the government code, which is the Open Meetings Act. Consent agenda. I've yet to see a city actually do it right. Typically, you have a consent agenda, you tag or pull the items you want to discuss, then you vote on what remains of the consent agenda, and it's for all of it. Then you go back and you discuss each individual item that you tagged. That's the proper procedure for doing that. Any other questions on agendas?
think the mayor had a question.
I did.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, going back to the meetings on 4.3 grading.
Yep.
And there's special meetings where, and where we are currently with 5 members, we're just requesting 3 members to call for an open, for a special meeting. Wouldn't it constitute breaking the Open Meetings Act?
No,
If
the
there's 3.
the charter requires 3 members, sets as a minimum 3 members to call a special meeting. To avoid even coming close to breaking that, I would suggest that you send your request in to CJ or the manager or Michael. They'll hold a special meeting on this issue.
And it's 3 members, whether we have 5 city council members or 7?
Correct. Correct.
So
And that follows state law too, under the local government code that says 3.
So if I wanna, how would the communication of the 3 together, let me see.
There shouldn't be communications between the 3, there shouldn't be a daisy chain, but you can certainly talk to one and say, I'd like a special meeting on just this. Not a discussion of the item, just, I'd like a special meeting on this date and on this subject. And I'm sending this email in. And that person can do that. But trying to discuss, and you know, it gets a little dicey here, but this is the way state law is. Discussing whether you should have a meeting is not necessarily a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Discussing the subject matter, whether you're gonna vote this way or that way, yes. But saying, I just wanna have a meeting, I mean, you gotta be able to communicate. Like the Railroad Commission, there are only 3 members. So, there's no way that they wouldn't have a quorum, and any of them ask, well, let's have a meeting on, some more on gas issue.
Just back to your example where you're saying, it's just for example, Mr. Murdoch wanted to call a special meeting and he talks to Ms. Tristan. Those 2, they both send in the request to the manager. I guess he just basically wants a clarification, how would he be able to get that 3rd person?
Talk to them about it.
So he could.
You could, so.
Smoke signals.
Tea leaves.
Under meetings, I think we should put a notice provision, since we have quorum in regular meetings and special meetings, that notice has to be 72 hours in advance. I mean, it's
Or which,
just anywhere, I think it should be a separate subheading under 4, section 4.
How many hours in advance?
Say what?
72.
It has to be a minimum of 72. I mean, it is just,
I mean,
it's
it
the
should
same
be-
thing as open meetings law, but if we're putting the rest of it in here, I think I would put that in our protocol as well.
okay,
You wanna do it under quorum notice, and then before you go into regular meetings, and then adjust those subheadings going down.
do you not think that's covered under 5.2?
No. I mean, it could if we would spell it out, if we wanna expand 5.2, because, but that's just citing charter section 4.0215.
And 551 of the government code.
Yeah.
Meetings and.
Right, but if we're putting it under part of the meetings, I don't care, I mean, I just think it for,
No,
if we wanna be fully
Yeah.
complete with, we're citing everything else under open meetings and quorum and everything else, I think there should be a notice provision.
Okay.
Notice is still required.
And if you're gonna do that, then of course for emergency meetings to be able to
Yeah,
get the 2-hour notice,
Mhm.
just so people.
yeah, there's a new AG opinion on emergency meetings via Tim, and what's required for that, so. I'll put that in.
And then on 5.3 on the consent agenda, having the rule written the way it's written this way, does that preclude the removal of an item for specific consideration by request?
No, because it says,
Okay. It's just the formulation of how they get onto that portion of the agenda, right?
that is addressed later on in the minutes, in the meeting, in the deliberation. I think those reading that.
Hard to say. Maybe.
this is an example of how complicated this can be, is we're gonna be shuffling through what's what, and instead of having just one document that allows us to, you know, be able to just go there and be able to look at these, you know, rules, I guess, in order, and be able to, you know, find what we need instead of having to go here or the ethics or.
Ethics or code of ethics is not required.
But CJ, didn't we, in the HR policy that was written, wasn't there a portion of that that was for city council?
No,
It's not.
no. The only thing that HR touches on with city council members is your compensation, so your WT, your payroll.
So, James, I can meld both together and have one document. It's not gonna necessarily be shorter. It'll be blended together, but the procedure rules were required under the charter. The ethics code is something that was requested by council. So I have one that's mandatory and one that's optional, so I kept them separate. If y'all wanna put them together, we can certainly put them together. That's your choice.
I mean, I'd like to see an ethics policy adopted, to the point where an HR professional is able to look at it, look at the law, look, you know, on, historical information, whether it be on the corporate level or the city municipal level. But through here, where I'm coming from is what's redundant, in here versus another law, and the purpose of it being in here, is it just for our information? Is it, I mean, is there a more efficient way of being able to communicate this information out to where we can be able to quickly address at any time, what's on here, the content of it?
These rules are just for meetings.
Okay.
Ethics rules are for your conduct, both in meetings and outside of meetings. And, taking it a little bit out of order, there's two basic parts of the code of ethics and conduct. There's the ethics part and there's the conduct part. So, these that we're going over is just for the meetings we're having today or in council chamber. I don't know, an HR specialist wouldn't be telling council how to behave. It's going to be council telling council members how to behave. Under the ethics policy, for instance, Missouri City doesn't have one at all. Sugar Land has a separate ethics commission. So, do you wanna stand, if you're accused of something, do you wanna be standing before a separate ethics commission? Or do you wanna be standing before this body? I drafted it as that you're standing before this body. Now, if y'all don't want an ethics, code of ethics or conduct at all, you don't have to have it. And it's just this. But if you want both, we can blend them or we can keep them separate. But the way my mind works on it is this is just how you conduct your regular meeting or maybe a special meeting.
So I think we should keep them separate because the charter specifically says we have to have rules of procedure. I mean, that's a specific line item in the charter.
Well, let me go ahead and do the overview and then we can get into the tall grass. Minutes, certified agenda, it tags the manager as being responsible for that or his designee. Public comment, charter requires public comment. It's up to the chair when that public comment comes. It can be at the public comment section, or it can be as each individual item comes up. I want to make it clear, this is an open meeting, and what that means is it's open to the public can watch, the public can hear. but the public does not have a right to speak. It is an open meeting. The public has a right to speak when it's a public hearing. So,
Brady, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't it in our charter that the public has an opportunity to speak at open meetings?
I think they
at
changed
regular
it to
meetings,
minutes.
for a time to be determined by this council. So my point is, you have a right, typically you don't have a right to speak. The charter grants you that right to speak, only in a regular meeting. And it can be all at once, which I have seen cities do, or it can be on the individual items, which I have seen cities do. But it's up to the chair to call it like that.
In the public comment section, you have that the public must submit a written public comment request.
There's usually.
The sign-in sheet,
So the sign-in sheet
yeah, I
counts
just
as that.
fancy word for that.
And then it says that they have to say whether they're for and against an agenda item. Well, what if it's just a comment?
Then it's on a non-agenda item.
So they need to say if they're for or against their own comment on a non-agenda item?
And you're just basically wanting a explanation of what you're gonna speak about.
That comes into play because the order of number of speakers under 7.6 limits it to 5 and 5, for and against.
Okay, I actually would move to strike both of those. I don't think we need, that people should have to say whether they're gonna speak for or against. And I don't think, it goes on to say that delivery of public comment as requested does not entitle a person to speak. I don't know what that's referencing, I'm assuming that's the letters that sometimes get sent to Misty and that she reads them, but just the fact that they should have a right to comment, whether they're for or against or stand up and talk, and saying how many people can speak for or against shall not exceed 5 persons against any such item. I just think you can't limit the public's
That's what I
right
was
to
getting at.
participate.
Liberals?
But-
Okay.
Yes, I know.
So when we
Yeah,
had the
funny.
bus barn
Mm-hmm.
party, and the school board limited us to how many, if people were getting up and saying the same thing, and we would have sat there for 3 hours listening to the same thing being said over and over and over.
But I also believe it's the people's government, and if we have to sit here for 5
Right.
hours so they can tell us how much they do or don't like something, then that's our
Well, what they
responsibility.
had asked us to do is all get together and choose 5 people to, because everybody was saying the same thing.
My point was, this in here does not say, I mean, the fact that you're asking someone to be for or against what they're speaking on, I just don't think
Yeah.
that's right. They just should be able to have their 3 minutes to say what they feel like we need to hear, and we should be open to it and listen. But I mean, if it becomes this thing where we're turning it in, like 1 minute of their 3 minutes is having to follow these rules of, this is my name, I'm for or against this item, and this, I just think it takes away a little bit of public's rights to be open. That's just my opinion on that one.
We can bake this cake any way y'all want to, so you just need to give me your feedback and I can fine tune it. If you've ever been to an Austin City Council meeting, and the Looney Tunes that, show up and talk about alien landings and they speak French, okay, but it's for or against an agenda item.
Yeah, I mean, it just says, so first they state their name, then they state the agenda item, then they state if it's not an agenda item, what the item is, then they state are they for or against the actual item they're speaking on, then they get to speak. I just think that's,
So it's like,
it's like
sniffer
rules.
dogs. Sniffer dogs, but what do you?
Here, follow these 5 rules first.
Well, we can't take a vote in a workshop, but out in the meeting, unless they're, I could think.
I think what you're trying to ask for is there a feeling of consensus on this issue? And it would seem to me that council feels like they don't wanna have this prohibition.
Okay, so we'll take out you still have to have a sign-in sheet. It
Yeah,
should be a
Yeah,
sign-
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I don't-
We'll take out for and against. You take out does not entitle,
In the order?
and do you wanna take out 5?
Yes.
Is there a consensus on that?
I think it should be up to the chair, because if people wanna
Yeah.
speak on agenda items, that it makes it more relevant when we're considering it to hear that, as opposed to hearing something at the beginning, and then possibly an hour later, try to remember back what was said after we've taken in a lot of other information. So I think it should be up to the chair.
On the number?
Oh, no, I thought you were talking about just the public comment. No, I don't like,
So,
I don't like
I don't-
the order, I like the order, but I don't like the number.
So I didn't understand your comment on the comments.
You're talking about 5 and you're talking about 6, right?
Yeah. Well, 5 kind of rolls into 6, cause you still, the order and time of the public comment shall be determined by the presiding officer. Then 6 is order and number of speakers. So I think they can be collapsed and just to be whatever it is, and then the order be up to the chair.
You don't think there should be any limit on the number of speakers?
I think if people take the time to show up at their government, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, if they take the time to show up at their government meeting, they should have the opportunity to address, even if they stand up and just sing us the Star Spangled Banner for 3 minutes.
I agree.
I don't wanna see a limit either. I just think that I think we've had a lot of hot topics here and people spoke their piece and it didn't really change our entire.
It's one of those things, it's a living document, if it becomes a problem
just
sooner
not
down the line.
Right, if we have 300 people sign up for 3 minutes every single
That's
meeting,
what we
then
need.
yeah,
we
we
can
should-
revisit.
Meetings like.
So, since we're on
Live through
the
it.
number 3, is 3 minutes sufficient time for y'all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on section 7? Section 8, deliberations. Sets out the mayor's role in presiding presiding over the meeting. 8.2 I wanted to focus on.
Before we go to 8.2, on 8.1 is adherence to procedural rules, part of the function of the presiding officer, or strictly the parliamentarian.
Say again?
The adherence to procedural rules, because he's shall assist the council in focusing on the agenda item and the deliberations, shall control the debate and order of speakers. Is he also responsible for adherence to the procedural rules, or is that the parliamentarian?
It is the officer. The parliamentarian is advisory to the mayor. If the mayor doesn't enforce the rules, you can ask to appeal the mayor's decision. That goes to the council for a majority vote.
So on the 3rd line, I would, after discussions and deliberations, insert the phrase, shall assist the city council in focusing on agenda discussion and deliberations, adherence to procedural rules, and shall control the debate and order of speakers.
Okay? 8.2. Alright. Some cities, before an item can be taken up on the agenda, requires a motion and a second. Some of them go, alright, I move on agenda item 8.2 for discussion purposes only. Some find that kind of clumsy. If it's on the agenda, you should be able to discuss it with just a motion. So the way it's written right now, deliberations may occur prior to any motion. So if it's on the agenda, it comes up, usually the mayor reads the agenda item. Missouri City, they have the city attorney read the agenda item for some reason. I don't wanna read agenda items. Y'all can do that, or Dee can read it, or someone can read it. And then you can begin debate after that.
Does that conflict with Robert's Rules of Order?
That's what I was thinking. That's not what it's stating.
Typically, but
It does.
it's, this rules say these rules, or you have Robert's Rules of Order unless they conflict with these rules, and then these rules prevail.
In Robert's Rule of Order, you have to make a motion and a second, then you can discuss, right?
Correct.
I think that's what we should be following if we're quoting Robert's Rule of Order.
Well, you can make exceptions to Robert's Rules, is what I'm saying, if that's what you wanna do. If you wanna be able to discuss any item without at least, without 2 people willing to discuss it. So what that
If it
does
dies
is.
for a motion, then it wasn't gonna be passed anyways, I mean.
Yeah. But there's some benefit in having a discussion, but again, that's y'all's choice if you wanna require, anybody can put, any council member, under general law, any council member can put any item on the agenda. Robert's Rules of Order, it takes 2 people to discuss that item. So if you take out 8.2, it's gonna take 2 people to discuss the item, even if a 3rd person put it on the agenda. Is that what you want?
Well, if we're gonna say we're adhering to Robert's Rules of Order, which we actually need to, we gotta decide what we're gonna do. I think it should be a combination of both, cause right now it says Robert's Rules of Order, 2nd edition. current edition is the 11th edition. But the Robert's Rules of Order in brief is on the second edition, and I think it should be a combination of that. And if we want to do a strict adherence to Robert's Rules of Order, then it would require a motion and a second before deliberation. But if we want to do it in brief, I mean, that's kind of a truncated version of sort of what we're doing now.
And aren't we moving towards more workshops before? So this will already kind of been discussed as well, so we can stick with Robert's Rule of Order.
And
That's
also,
what y'all want?
I wish we could have provided the Robert's Rule of Order edition too, so.
But we were
Is it
gonna
reference?
order them, and then I realized that there was the 11th edition and then the second
Mhm.
edition of brief, so I wasn't sure.
Here you go.
Yeah.
That's my cheat sheet in color for y'all. Take one and pass it around.
Mayor, we just came back from a culture procedure,
That's
and
what
most of the cities have adopted Robert's Rules of Order, and they always have a motion and a second before any item is discussed.
And that's what, when we went to TML, that's what they told us we should be doing.
So,
as well.
yeah, that's what we just discussed. Mhm.
I've had some cities go both ways, so whatever way y'all wanna go is how we'll do it. So, motion and second then, kind of a consensus?
Can I just interject one more thing? We'd also discussed if you wanted to take something for a different procedural, then you would have to bring it up before a vote for the council. And it would have to be the 2/3 vote, not the majority vote, in order to
So
proceed with it.
can that bring us back to section 3.2 on suspension of the rules? I'm very leery to actually include that. I mean, I know you need it in there, but can it be a suspension of the rules on a particular item so that if council were so inclined to proceed as Ms. D just suggested, then there could be a motion to suspend the rules for that item? As opposed to a suspension of the rules, because I'd hate to put all these, right, put all these rules in place before the meeting, and then we have no rules, and then when the meeting adjourns, and the rules come back in place, it kind of defeats what we're doing here.
Alright, so under 3.2, nobody has an objection to the 2/3 vote to suspend, right?
No, I don't have an objection, but I did have, that's the super majority vote.
Correct. That's fair.
I don't know if we needed to move to executive session to get legal advice on that in the home rule charter, or is that something we can discuss in workshop?
You can do specific.
I don't have it, I'm looking for a more specific definition. The super majority vote, as written in the home rule charter. And when I've done research on it, it says that council defines that, and that's what I'm.
Well, a supermajority is more than a majority. Majority under 5 is 3, so it has to be.
Right, but we don't have a definition on what supermajority is. Does it include just council? Does it include council and mayor? Does it include,
Mayor does
what?
not vote under the charter except in the time.
but that's not defined in there.
Is it council members that are present?
And that's what I need to
No,
know.
it says full city council, so that was specifically discussed at the charter meetings. And it was full city council on all votes. So if only 3 of you show up, which would be a quorum under 5, and it required a supermajority vote fails because there's not a 4th person there.
Right.
If it requires a majority, it's all unanimous vote under 3 because it's the full city council.
But
I
guess
didn't feel like it was defined that way. That's what I'm saying. And it said the city council, when I did research, it said city council would interpret that along with the city attorney.
Well, supermajority?
It's not specifically defined.
Under 3.09C, it says,
I don't have it with me, it said home.
okay. For purposes, for that subsection, it's talking about majorities and stuff. It talks about a majority shall mean an integer greater than 1/2 of the full city council, provided that any one or more council members required by law to abstain, blah, blah, blah.
So what that means is when you take a 5-member council, you do 2/3, you divide it by 3, you multiply it by 2, you get a fraction. You can't do away with a fraction of a vote. You have to round up. So that's what it means by the next integer greater.
So that's 4.
So that's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert's Rules of Orders defines that too.
I'm sorry, we're lost on the section in the document.
3.09
I'm in, yeah, I'm in the charter.
of the charter,
3.09 in the charter.
C.
And this is the one I read.
Yeah, he's correct. We just got a chart somewhere in my training stuff, I'm gonna share it with them. If I locate it, but if you only got 5 members, you gotta have at least 4 for the supermajority.
So, in some, I guess what I'm trying to say, in some cities, when they say full city council, that includes the mayor.
If the mayor votes. The mayor doesn't vote under this charter.
Where is that in the charter?
Under mayor,
And the mayor's powers.
And does it say for city council or full city council?
full city council, the mayor is not technically part of the city council.
Where's that say?
Yeah, it's not clearly defined throughout the charter on that issue, because when it goes back to even procedures of, council being able to discuss with staff, it says it has to go through the city manager, but it never states anything about the mayor.
And
And so-
defines
so-
full city
so-
council with
yeah.
a supermajority versus city council with a quorum.
Okay, let's go to section 3.03. The membership of the city council shall be composed of 7 council members. Not the
Got it.
mayor,
All right.
so the mayor is not part of city council. It is
Exactly, and so
the 7 council
where's the
members.
definition for what a full city council means? Now, when I looked into this and I contacted someone, they said that is determined by city council. It should be interpreted by city council on how we interpret the definitions, especially if it's not clearly defined.
But it is, it says the membership of city council shall be composed of 7 council members.
So
Under a, yeah.
You're are unsure of the word full? Because the charter
Yes,
commission minutes.
because some cities, when I've read other charters, say full city council includes the mayor, therefore for a supermajority, the mayor can vote especially when one is absent.
That's
If,
not.
say if we only had 2 people and we needed a supermajority vote, so full city council would not also include the mayor in this case.
No. The mayor does not vote
Why
except
doesn't
in
it
the
say
tie.
it in there though, and how do we interpret that?
Because 3.03 says the city council is defined as 7 members. The mayor,
It
the
doesn't say
mayor,
full.
where is the term of the mayor?
Membership of city council is what it says, it doesn't say the full city.
Look,
Right, but it doesn't put the mayor in there.
We didn't define the word full.
Seven. So for anything to be a supermajority now, it would have to be, so it has to be 5.
Of the 7, so,
But it's stipulating that the full city council is considered 7, regardless of the 5.
which we don't even have now anyways.
We are in the transition period.
You're in the transition period, so you go to the end and work up, so your supermajority would apply to whatever your current membership is. So if it's 5, then it'll be 6, and it'll be 7 in 3 consecutive years.
If you look at the minutes of the charter commission, they debated this for a long time. And the definition of full city council meant all the elected council.
And it's not in there like that though.
Well-
And that's what, when I looked into this, I was speaking to people who, from TML and stuff, I was trying to understand this better. It wasn't specifically defined. So I guess
Full?
my question is, because in a lot of cities, a full city council is different than a city council when you're voting on supermajority, especially if people are absent
So Scott Houston said that that's subject to interpretation of
by city council.
He said that.
Yes.
That's why I
Well,
asked you
not
that question the
Scott.
other day, because when I was reading it, it's not clear when it says, 2/3
So it
supermajority,
just goes,
based
The-
on the full council,
It
is that
wasn't
full
Scott
present,
Houston.
full elected body, there wasn't a definition.
So I can bring the minutes, but we didn't define the word full because full means all. So all of city council,
But
not
he's
who
able to
is
br-
that,
mayor's able to
let me
bring the
finish.
tie.
All does not mean just who shows up for a quorum. So full city council means all of the elected officials. We didn't say full means 5 or 6 or 7 because it's floating during the transition
Right.
period. So when it says a full city council, that means all those votes are required on the number of council elected at that particular year. This year, it's 5. Next year, it's 6. And in 18, it's 7. So full city council just means, full means all.
But we're talking about two different votes. We're talking about a quorum voting on a normal meeting and a supermajority vote.
We're talking about
Whereas some
voting.
cities, it's different. A
Agreed.
quorum can be just 3 council members voting on something and you're moving on. It's actually, a lot of cities do this separately. A supermajority vote means that the mayor also gets a vote based on a full city council.
But that would have been defined in our charter, and the
Exactly,
mayor
and it
doesn't.
wasn't.
But it's, they don't give the mayor the power to vote except in the case of a tie. So they
But
can
they didn't
define.
define it in a supermajority. I'm just, this is what, I
In
mean, I have a
some
question,
cities-
because I don't think it's defined, I don't think it's clear,
In some
and I want it to remain
cities-
consistent.
In some cities, the mayor votes. I think in Missouri City, the mayor votes.
And in some, only, the mayor only votes during a supermajority.
And in some, the
It's
mayor doesn't vote
specifically
unless there's a
authorized by
tie.
their charter.
But here, it specifically said the mayor doesn't vote. And it specifically said on all votes, it's the full council. And that's consistent from the minutes of the charter commission and how it was adopted and approved.
But how I read it, and I would think that maybe a citizen could read it this way, I just wanna remain consistent, that's what I'm trying to get at, is that the mayor it was defined that the mayor cannot vote on a regular agenda item. When it comes to the suspension of rules, or some of the other things that the charter has outlined that needs a supermajority, there was no definition on whether or not the mayor was included. So I tried to do some
Therefore-
research.
Okay?
So, and they said when it has not been defined specifically, that it is council interpretation, but it has to remain consistent. And then put in the 2-year, am I making sense to anyone? Okay. It needs to be put in 2 years, basically. And I think that's where we're getting this kind of, I don't know, I think we're leaving ourselves open to some gray, and which isn't good, because we're talking 2/3 supermajority, regular vote. There is no definition on this supermajority, there's only definition on the regular. That's how I'm interpreting, I'm not sure if everybody else is seeing, like, understanding what I'm saying.
I could see both sides of the argument on this, and
The,
On subsection 309C, unless is otherwise provided by this charter or other law, each vote, order, decision, or other action taken by the city council shall require an affirmative vote of the majority of the full city council, and then it goes on. And it only allows, if you continue to the end of that sentence on page 5, and provided that the mayor shall have the right to cast the deciding vote if in the case of a tie, but shall not otherwise have any right, power, or authority to vote against or veto any action taken of the city council.
so the only way you have a tie is not on a supermajority because it is a supermajority.
Right.
So if the mayor can never vote except if there's a tie, he never votes on the supermajority.
And the only way there can be a tie if it's not a supermajority.
If there was, next year, if there was a 3-3 vote, it's not a supermajority, he cannot
Right, so that
cast the
does not-
supermajority
I
vote.
don't understand how this is not about supermajority then.
And then also the definition of full.
And we're not gonna be consistent that way. Okay.
Well, how else would you describe a council if you don't describe it as a full city council?
Well, it just, that's because the
That's
question
where
I
I'm
asked
just
you, that's why I
confused.
asked you was, what is considered full, cause it wasn't clear, is it the full city council present at that meeting where that item is being voted on, or is it the full city council that is elected?
If you look at the legislative history, if you look at the
And there
minutes,
is
and I'll
no
bring.
clear history on it, like
I
for
would disagree.
supermajority.
I would disagree on voting
Okay.
of the mayor and the full city council because we specifically discussed, do y'all wanna have just a majority of the council members that are there at any one meeting? Or do you wanna have the full city council? And it was consistent throughout the debate, it was the full city council required to make every vote. And then if there was a tie on the vote, say there was 5 city councilors, there was a conflict of interest, that person had to abstain, so now you have 2 and 2. The mayor can cast a vote, but the mayor would never cast a vote on a
But then
2/3
say,
majority.
back in the charter though, if there was 5 and one has to be abstained
By law only.
by,
So they're-
in an abstention, okay, so just by law, so
Right.
the
If
abstention
they
would be
choose
a
to, if
vote
they
of
try
no.
to abstain, it automatically counts as a no, and it's specifically addressed, and they actually had a really long debate about that, saying that we elected you, it's your job to get up there and cast a vote, yes or no. Not abstain just because you don't wanna take a position on an issue, right? If you abstain, then it's a no vote.
But
Unless
if
you have a
you-
legal reason, which you then would have to file your conflict of interest
And
prior
you
to
couldn't
doing it.
vote, then you're down to a 4 count,
Right.
4 counts. Same thing with 7, if you have a conflict of interest, you're down to 6 votes, you have 3 and 3, you get to break the tie. But you don't get to, if there requires a supermajority vote,
You would never
it's
get
not
to
a
vote.
tie. It's a it may be a majority, but taxes, for instance, usually requires a super majority. If there was a tie, you couldn't cast the vote to break, I mean, if there wasn't a tie and it was 4 to 2, is that right? And you needed 5 to adopt, you couldn't cast the vote to make it adopt.
So it's defined by saying council is this, you mark it through you do the math based on your transition period, and then once you get to the end of your transition period, you apply the mathematical formula to a council of 7. And the mayor doesn't have the power to vote except in the,
I hear what y'all are saying, and I mean, I appreciate the feedback on it, I do not agree, I mean, and that's, you know, we don't have to all agree. I don't agree that city council defined what the quorum is the same as city council defined needing a supermajority vote, or when there's absent and we don't have enough to do a supermajority vote. I think that they're not defined clearly, and in the research I've done, that was stated that it needs to be defined and interpreted, and then be consistent with it, and that's just my opinion on it.
So we need to define the word full.
Yes, when in regards to, especially because it's not used consistently. Sometimes it says city council, quorum of the city council. 3 is the mayor, it says city council is the 7, and then you have the mayor, but it changes completely when, I mean, I read it over and over again, and it changes completely when it talks about supermajority vote, and it changes to full city council.
Anytime it talks about voting, it's talking about full city council. That
Right,
was
you can conduct-
consistently the,
but you can conduct business with a quorum.
That just states city council, not a full
Correct.
city council. And my thing is on some other charters in other cities, it changes for full city council. A full city council for supermajority vote changes and the mayor votes. I'm just trying to say, like, what if 2 of us are absent? How do we continue on with business or something? I
cause you
mean,
have a quorum.
Cause you have a
Yeah,
quorum.
So-
but then we can't do a
Any
supermajority vote.
item that requires a supermajority will not ever be able to be,
Right, because the people didn't show up to participate in the process they were elected to do.
You have a quorum of city council, and that takes all the positions, all 5 this year, divide it by 2 and add 1, and that's 3. So when you say a quorum of city council, that's 3. Those 3 can conduct business.
Just not a supermajority vote, which actually I don't know, to me, we needed a lot of supermajority votes for different things. Suspension of rules, taxes, I mean, let's just say 2 are
But the reason
absent.
you raise it to a supermajority is because those aren't topics that should be considered lightly.
I agree
You know?
completely, and that's why I'm,
Could never
right.
But-
do business on them if,
But you could, because you would assume that everyone's there, that's why they have a rule against absenteeism also in the charter.
and that's why I thought, then that's when, I thought that's why they were using the word full city council when they talked about supermajority, to include the mayor, like a lot of cities do.
Full city council is for voting only. Quorum of the city council decides the quorum, which is 3, then you can conduct business. But what it means is, for the votes to conduct the business, all 3 have to be unanimous. It can't be a 2-to-1 vote. In effect, the Charter Commission said no more 2-to-1 votes. It has to be 3 to pass something in the city, and if only 3 show up at the city council meeting, those 3 have to vote unanimously to pass
So as a council,
Whatever.
we couldn't define what a full city council is
No,
for
it's defined in
supermajority.
the charter.
So,
I just
whether-
disagree with that.
for getting back on track to our
Yeah.
procedure here, our discussion about the charter, we need to understand it and have a full appreciation for it. It says what it says, and so we have to adopt these rules based on what it currently
But
is.
it doesn't say everything. It
Well,
leaves gray area to be interpreted.
I think that's,
Let me,
that we're gonna
let me
disagree on
interject,
that.
'cause we're running short on time, it's been a great discussion, we can go on for a lot longer time, but, let's go ahead and, we had another item D, which we're going to postpone that one, I don't think CJ has anything ready for
The district,
the district consultation, so let's go ahead and, call for a motion for adjournment, and we'll just take this.
make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion by Mr. Tristan, second by Ms. Krennic, adjourned at 6:57.
So noted, Mayor.
We gotta go to court? Is that what it's gonna take?
I guess we're taking sides here.